Hopefully, after looking at what PHP can do for you, you're excited to get started. Let's examine what we're going to need before we install. In order to install PHP on your computer so that we can start learning it, you're going to need a few things. First, we're going to need a web server, and that's going to be to serve up the web files that we're going to look at in our browser. And we're going to install that on our local machine, not on some special piece of hardware somewhere else. It's no problem to have a web server exist on your computer and also have the browser that's receiving and sending files to that web server also on your computer. And we're going to need PHP so that our web server will understand the PHP files that we create and then serve them to our browser. And we're going to want to have a database so that we can start creating PHP applications that connect to that database, which will give us the ability to create more full-featured applications. And we'll need a text editor to edit our PHP files, that is, to write our code. And we'll need, of course, a web browser. And any web browser is going to work for you: Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, or Opera. Remember, PHP just outputs HTML, so anything that understands HTML is going to suit our purposes fine. Now, I'll be using a web server, which will be Apache 1.3, PHP, which is going to be the latest version, 5.2.1. The database I'm going to use is MySQL 5.0. And the text editor will be TextMate. That's going to be a text editor that's specific for Macintosh, and Macintosh will be the platform I'll be using. And the web browser I'll be using is Firefox. Now, your setup may be very different from mine. You may be working on a Windows machine. You may have a Linux machine. You may have a different text editor, different browser. Don't worry about that. Remember, PHP is going to be cross-platform. So the installation will be different for you versus someone else. And I'm going to teach you how to install those on different systems. But the PHP lessons after we get started are going to be the same regardless of which platform you're working on. So our general installation plan is going to be that we're going to install all these things on our local machine. We're going to develop there. We're going to be able to run the web server on our local machine and view those files in our local browser. And then we're done and we finally have a finished website. You would be able to push those files up onto a web server somewhere else, like a web host. Maybe you have a shared hosting solution or something like that, and you can FTP to their servers and put those PHP files up there. But we're going to set up for local development on our machine the same way that a PHP developer would do. Now, I said that you could use any combination of platform, web server, database, etc. But I want to go ahead and tell you also that the most common combinations are going to be what's referred to as either LAMP, MAMP, WAMP, or XAMPP. Now, it's LAMP for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, or WAMP, which is Windows, Apache, MySQL, PHP, or MAMP for Macintosh, Apache, MySQL, PHP, or XAMPP with an X, XAMP, which means any of those. It's really, we're talking about any platform with Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So you can see the trend that's developing there. Most people are going to be using Apache, MySQL, and PHP regardless of their platform. In fact, 75% of the web uses Apache. Incidentally, 20% is Microsoft, and the 5% belongs to other servers besides that. So these are going to be popular choices, and they may make your life easier, and you may find more resources out there to help you if you run into problems if you stick with one of these major packages. Now, if you run into problems or if you have a different configuration, from the start, I want to point you to php.net, the website that we just saw. php.net/manual/en for English /install.php is going to give you everything that you need to know to get installed, regardless of your platform. And that's going to be kept up to date. It's always going to be there as a resource. And as we saw when we looked at Echo, there'll even be community feedback, helpful tips and tricks that might help you out if you run into problems. And php.net is also going to be a great place to always find out what the latest version of PHP is, if there are any particulars about the installation that you need to know about, in case something changes in the future. Now, while you certainly could go to that URL and get it installed for yourself, I'm also going to walk you through it on the Macintosh and Windows platforms just to make sure that everyone gets a good start and we're ready to begin learning PHP together. So let's do that in the next movie.